You hear stories like this and think, no way. No one could be that bold, that entitled, that detached from reality. But then someone like Madison Hartley comes along and proves, once again, that reality can be so much more chaotic than fiction. It's New Year's Eve. Fireworks, glitter, champagne, bad decisions. And somewhere in the middle of all that, Madison Hartley, daughter of Senator Richard Hartley, leaves a lavish party in a high-end car, so drunk she can barely stand, with champagne still in hand. Her blood alcohol level? A staggering .21. Add cocaine to the mix, and you got yourself a walking disaster. A fast-moving one. She doesn't make it far. At 50 miles per hour, she flies through a red light and crashes into another vehicle, completely obliterating the driver's side. That driver? Robert Sullivan, Vietnam vet, 69 years old, a man who spent New Year's Eve volunteering at a veteran shelter. The kind of person who quietly makes the world better while the rest of us are busy celebrating. And Madison? She stumbles out of her car, laughing. No concern for the man she just hit. No horror. No shame. Just a drunk, coked-up heiress swaying in designer heels, telling officers that they're wasting their time because, quote, my dad's a senator. I'll be out by morning. You know what's worse than saying something like that? Actually believing it. Fast forward a few weeks to the courtroom. Madison's finally facing the music, or so it seems. You might think this is where she turns the corner, right? Humbled. Realizes the weight of what she's done. Nope. She's strutting like she's being dragged into an inconvenience. Minimal expression. Designer suit. That look some people have when they think the system's just a formality. Her defense? That tired, worn-out line. It was New Year's. Everyone drinks. Yes, Madison. Everyone drinks. But not everyone drinks. Uses cocaine. Gets behind the wheel. Crashes into a Vietnam vet. And then tries to bully their way out with family connections. The judge? Frank Caprio. The kind of judge who balances empathy with reality. He's listened to thousands of excuses in his time, but even he looks genuinely appalled. And right as she's giving her explanation mid-sentence, Madison's phone, which she apparently brought into courtroom like this was a brunch meeting, lights up on the table. The judge notices. He leans in. What is that? She mumbles something about needing to check in with her family. Caprio raises an eyebrow. The courtroom is silent. Then, with the calm of someone who's completely done with the nonsense, Caprio picks up a phone and reads a message aloud. Dad, this is bad. Can you call the judge? Remind him who we are. Pause for dramatic effect. You could feel the collective cringe ripple through the courtroom. Even her own lawyer looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. People on the jury exchanged wide-eyed glances. One woman gasped. Not quietly. But Caprio? He just nodded. Then, in what might be one of the boldest courtroom moments in recent memory, he calls Senator Hartley on speaker. Not a recess. Not a private chambers conversation. Right there in front of the room. Senator Hartley, Caprio begins. Your daughter has requested I speak with you. The senator's voice comes through the speaker, calm, cautious. Is she all right? Caprio responds, that depends on what you mean by all right. She appears to believe that your political influence is grounds for dismissal. And then, the plot twist nobody saw coming. Senator Hartley doesn't defend her, doesn't scold the judge, doesn't ask for privacy. He says, loud and clear, I am not here to interfere. I'm asking for justice. Equal treatment. No special favors. She should be held accountable, as any citizen would. Mic drop. You can say a lot about the guy. Politicians always come with baggage, but that moment, that was real. You could see the shift on Madison's face. That slight widening of the eyes. The twitch of disbelief. The realization that she wasn't going to be rescued. Not this time. And Caprio? He didn't let the moment pass. Miss Hartley, he said, your father understands what you clearly do not. Privilege is not a shield, especially not in this courtroom. Then came the sentencing. 60 days in jail. A $33,000 fine. Full license suspension. Mandatory community service. Restitution to Robert Sullivan. handwritten apologies. And here's the part that probably stung the most. She was required to speak publicly about what she did, not just to fulfill a legal requirement, but to make her live with it, in front of people, over and over again. Now, usually, that's where the story ends. A scandal, a sentence, some court-mandated community service. Fade to black. But Madison's saga had another act. At first, she treated her public speaking engagements like she was still playing damage control. She'd show up with pre-written statements, avoid eye contact, dodge hard questions. But after one event, a high school assembly where a student asked, "Did you ever apologize to the man you hit?" Something changed. She froze. She said quietly, "No." The room fell silent. And from that day forward, something cracked open. Maybe it was real remorse. Maybe it was the weight of public humiliation. Maybe it was finally understanding that no one could clean this up for her. She wrote to Robert Sullivan, visited the rehab center he was recovering at, not with camera crew, but with a nurse escort and a handwritten letter. He didn't speak to her that day, just nodded once and went back to his therapy. And still, she kept showing up. 1 month, 2 months, 6 months later, she was still attending victim panels, still volunteering at a hospital for veterans, still walking into auditoriums knowing full well that every person in the room knew exactly who she was and why she was there, not for fame, not for redemption, but because, maybe for the first time in her life, she realized she wasn't special, just human, and being human means you don't get to opt out of consequences. She became less Senator Hartley's daughter and more the girl who stayed when everyone else would have disappeared. And slowly, so slowly, people started to listen, not forgive, not forget, but listen. Robert Sullivan, he eventually gave a statement. I don't need her to say sorry. I need her to keep doing the work. And that's the takeaway. Because this story isn't about one night of reckless behavior. It's about what happens after, when the spotlight fades, when the name no longer carries weight, when your only choice is to prove again and again that you're willing to live with what you've done and try to make it right. So what do you think? Was justice served? Did Madison Hartley actually learn something? Can someone born into that level of privilege really change? Or is this all just carefully managed PR? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear it all. And if you're into courtroom chaos, public downfalls, and real-world plot twists that feel way too dramatic to be real, don't forget to subscribe. Because trust me, this isn't the last time someone thinks their last name can save them. But Karma, she reads everything out loud. You hear Senator's daughter, and your mind automatically fills in the blanks. Country club lawyers, backdoor negotiations, a carefully worded apology written by a PR team who's paid very well to spin the narrative. You assume the story ends with a fine, some community service, and a soft-focus interview about learning from mistakes. But this one didn't go that way. Because instead of a sanitized media tour, Madison got handed reality in its rawest form. Judge Caprio didn't just hold her accountable. He put her on blast, in front of the nation, with a phone call that may have been more effective than any sentence he could have handed down. Let's talk about that moment one more time because, honestly, it deserves its own museum exhibit. You've got this courtroom full of reporters, legal aides, probably a few stunned interns. Madison is mid-testimony, saying things like, "It was New Year's. Everyone was drinking," trying to sound reflective when her phone lights up, bright and buzzing right on the table. And instead of ignoring it like any normal person who knows they're on thin ice, she glances at it. The judge notices. He leans forward and says, "May I?" She hesitates, like maybe she forgot that she's not on TikTok Live and can't just wave it away. Caprio reads the screen, and before anyone has time to process it, he says, "Miss Hartley, would you care to explain this message to your father?" Then he reads it out loud. "Dad, this is going bad. Can you call the judge? Remind him who we are. Remind him who we are." Let's sit with that for a second, because it's not just a sentence. It's a reveal. It's a cracked mirror showing exactly how some people view the justice system, as a game, a negotiation, a favor owed, a reminder that they were born into immunity. And yet, she sent it during her own trial, in a courtroom, with cameras, under oath. You almost have to admire the sheer delusion. But here's what Madison didn't count on. This time, the adults in the room weren't playing along. Judge Caprio calls her father right there, puts him on speaker, and without skipping a beat, says, "Your daughter believes I should be reminded of your political status." Now, most politicians would have jumped into damage control mode, pleaded for privacy, claimed their daughter was struggling emotionally, or had made a poor judgment call. But not Senator Hartley. Nope. He takes a breath and says, with a tone that could freeze boiling water, "Your Honor, my daughter's behavior has already caused enough harm. She does not speak for me. She must be held accountable, not protected." And just like that, he drops the rope. No rescue. No power flex. Just accountability. And in that moment, for maybe the first time in her life, Madison realizes she's on her own. Let's be clear, this wasn't a one-time mistake. This wasn't, "I had one too many and made a bad call." This was a pattern. According to testimony from witnesses at the party, Madison had been drinking since early afternoon. She was openly snorting cocaine. And when someone offered to get her a car, she laughed and said, "I'll drive. I'm not drunk, I'm just buzzed." Yeah, she said that, with a blood alcohol level of 0.21. This wasn't about a bad night. This was about years of being told the rules didn't apply to her. Until suddenly they did. And who paid the price? Robert Sullivan, a man who'd survived war zones, who gave back to his community, who volunteered on a night when most people were thinking about fireworks and champagne. He wasn't out partying. He wasn't causing trouble. He was just driving home. And now, he's relearning how to walk, living with chronic pain, struggling with memory lapses from a head injury that never should have happened. For weeks after the crash, Madison didn't even acknowledge his name. Not once. When reporters asked if she had anything to say to the victim, she rolled her eyes and said, "It's in my statement." But the thing about hitting rock bottom is that it echoes. And once the sentence was handed down, and the silence around her grew deafening, Madison began to realize that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't the victim here. Her court-mandated speeches started off as exactly what you'd expect. Stiff, over-rehearsed, carefully vetted by lawyers. But something shifted during one of her early talks at a youth DUI prevention event. A teenager raised her hand and asked, "Do you think you'd be here if your last name wasn't Hartley?" Dead silence. Madison looked like she'd been slapped. For a moment, it looked like she wouldn't answer. But then she said, "Honestly, I think I'd be in prison." It was the first thing she'd said that didn't sound like it came from a lawyer's notes. And people noticed. From that point on, her speeches stopped being PR. They got messy, personal. She talked about the moment she realized she didn't know Robert Sullivan's name. The first time she walked into the rehab center and saw veterans in wheelchairs and understood she could have taken one of their lives. She talked about her own father, about how hard it was to hear him say she needed to face the consequences, how it felt like betrayal until she realized it was probably the only thing that had ever truly loved her into accountability. She also talked about shame, not the kind you feel when you get caught, the kind that follows you around after, that taps you on the shoulder when you pass a crosswalk, that makes you flinch when you hear tires screech, that makes you wonder if people see you or just see the wreckage you left behind. But let's not pretend this was some neat, redemptive arc. She still had haters. Still got messages calling her a killer. Still got followed by reporters who were waiting to catch her slipping up again. And the internet never forgets. Even a year later, anytime she's spotted in public, there's a chance someone will whisper, "That's her." A chance someone will snap a photo and post it with a caption like, "Madison Hartley trying to act normal at Starbucks." Because when you crash your life into someone else's and leave debris scattered across headlines, you don't get to quietly move on. You carry it, everywhere. And maybe that's the point. Madison's story isn't a redemption tale. It's a cautionary one. It's a reminder that actions don't disappear just because you have access, money, or a last name that turns heads. And more importantly, it's a reminder that sometimes justice actually shows up in the form of a judge who won't be pushed. in the form of a father who says no, in the form of a community that refuses to let you forget the damage you caused, but gives you a chance to make it mean something. So what now? Well, Madison's still showing up, still speaking, still trying to do the work. Will it ever be enough? Maybe not, but maybe that's not the point. Maybe the point is that for once, we watched someone powerful fall, and instead of being scooped up and protected, she had to sit in the mess. She had to feel it, live in it, and maybe eventually grow from it. And for the rest of us, it's a rare, brutally honest reminder. When you text your dad to remind the judge who you are, and the judge decides to remind you who you're not. That's not just a courtroom moment. That's a cultural reset. Now you tell me, was justice served? Did Madison earn the chance to change? Or was this all too little, too late? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you love stories where power meets reality and the receipts hit harder than a headline, hit that subscribe button. Because in a world where the rich and famous think they're untouchable, there's always a judge, a phone call, and a speaker waiting to set the record straight. And look, let's be real. Most people expected Madison Hartley to disappear after her 60-day sentence. Do the time, cut a check, quietly rebrand herself on a beach somewhere. Maybe show up a year later in a Finding Myself podcast interview with perfectly tousled hair and a latte in hand, talking about how rock bottom was the foundation she rebuilt on. But nope, that's not what happened. Because you don't get to crash into a veteran, end up trending on every platform, and then ghost your consequences. Especially not when your text gets read out loud in court, like a deleted scene from Succession. What makes this whole thing stick? Why we're still talking about it? Is that for once, someone actually had to sit in their own mess. No assistant, no fixer, no lawyer sweeping the glass off the sidewalk and saying, she's been through enough. And honestly, that's rare, because normally, stories like this come with a press release and a foundation in the victim's name. Madison? She got community service and a dad who hung her out to dry on speakerphone. A dad who, by the way, probably made political enemies for not shielding her. You could tell it gutted him, but he didn't waver. That phone call? It was 45 seconds of pure, unfiltered accountability. Not for the cameras, not for his own career, but because, maybe for the first time in her life, Madison needed to understand that not even a senator's daughter is immune to cause and effect. And that courtroom, it became the great equalizer. Because in that moment, no filters, no spin, no privilege left to hide behind. She wasn't the politician's daughter anymore. She was just a person who made a horrible choice, who caused real damage, who couldn't make it go away with a phone call or a last name. And that's the moment that stuck with people. It wasn't the crash. It wasn't even the sentence. It was the silence after that text was read out loud. The pause, the room holding its breath, as the illusion shattered in real time. And maybe, just maybe, that's what justice really looks like sometimes. Not in headlines, but in that awkward, unavoidable truth when someone finally sees themselves without the privilege buffer. So yeah, Madison Hartley might be out of jail. She might be rebuilding her life. But the story? It's still playing out. In courtrooms, in classrooms, in the comments. And if you ever forget what happens when power meets accountability, just remember, you can text your dad. You can ask him to fix it. But if the judge reads it on speaker, that's your legacy now.